I've made this analogy before too, where like you're sick, you go to the doctor, you get some medicine, or you break a bone, you get cast on, it heals, you're done, it's over, it's behind you now, right?
Yeah.
This is something that's kind of like more ongoing, where it doesn't just go away. Even PTSD, even the grief from losing my brother, all of those things, they don't just go away.
Welcome to the Vet Rise podcast. I'm your host, Juan Perez. My goal is to make success after service accessible to every veteran in society. I believe in the power of leveraging your service, not as a label that defines you, but as a launching pad for your next chapter. What we have been doing has not been working, and it's on us to start changing the culture. Enjoy the episode, and thank you for your time.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Vet Rise podcast. I'm joined today by one of my good friends, Scott. I actually had the opportunity to be on Scott's podcast not too long ago, and he changed my mindset on a lot of stuff. He set the standard of what it means to have a professional podcast. I'm talking about from start to end, and it just made me realize that when you want to get to the next level, you got to put yourself around high performers. You got to put yourself around people that are doing the thing that you want to do. I first met Scott at the Military Influencer Conference this last year. Wow, it's 2025. Last year in October, and right off the bat, I got to know him a little bit, but I like to save the real get-to-know-you moments and the real get-to-know-you conversations for podcasts. So we are kind of getting to know each other a little bit more today. I want to learn more about him. I don't want to steal any of his thunder, so I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself. Scott, do me a favor. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. And thank you for taking time to be with us here today. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. When we met, I kind of knew right away that you were kind of headed in the similar direction. We had kind of similar goals and everything. I was like, this is going to be a good opportunity to kind of chat with each other. I was glad to have you on my show and get to learn a little bit about you. The role has kind of been reversed now, so now you're getting to learn a little bit more about me.
Yeah.
So I am originally from Connecticut and moved out here to Arizona, where I live now, for about 11 years ago. I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard, did serve there for about 6 years, and I was an infantryman, deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, and that was a life-changing deployment for me and my family. It was just a roller coaster, and at the end, it kind of ended in a kind of crashing down moment. Probably the worst experiences you can imagine, kind of happening all at once. And I'm sure we'll get more into that. But just kind of a little info on that. It was my younger brother. He was also serving in Afghanistan. He was also an infantryman. He was with the Vermont Army National Guard. We both were there at the same time. And he was killed in action while we were both there. And so that was kind of like the ending of my deployment over there. And it was just such a awful experience. And then coming back home and coping with all of that, the grief of losing him, PTSD, other things that I was just dealing with at that time. Learning where I fit into my own family. I had just had my firstborn son was born just about a month or two before I deployed to Afghanistan. And it's like, now, I'm a father, but I didn't know how to be a father. Where do I fit in? My wife had been taking care of the parenting duties while I was gone. And, how do you even be a dad? It's like one of those things you gotta kind of have to figure out. And then when you walk into a house that someone's already kind of started figuring out how to be a parent, that was a difficult situation for me as well, trying to just figure out what my place is in the house. And combine all that stuff all together, and it just was sort of a recipe for disaster, and it didn't work out very well for me. So, and I'm sure we'll get more into that in a little bit, but kind of me in a nutshell. Started my podcast about almost 6 years ago now, 5.5-ish years ago now. And my podcast, the Drive On podcast, it's it's focused on helping military veterans and their families coping with a lot of the issues that we deal with after leaving the service. And, I did that because a lot of the folks around me, they were hurting, they were struggling. I was hurting, I was struggling. And I was like, you know what, there's got to be a better way than this 22 a day nonsense that we have going on in our community. And, who knows if that number's even right. It's just the catchy number that we put on it. But, I was like, I really don't want to sit around waiting for another phone call saying that another friend is gone, because of that. So I was like, I got to do something. Started the podcast, not having a clue what I was doing, by the way, when I started it. And here I am, 5.5 years later, still going strong. And loving all the conversations that I have with great men and women who either have served or are serving those who have served. And, it's just really for me, it's a fulfilling thing to be able to give back in that way.
Well, I was there around the same time, 2010. I can't imagine coming home. Like you don't even get to come home a normal way. I'm sure.
No.
Like there's no. I remember when I came home from Afghanistan, and my memory of coming home from Afghanistan was there was a bunch of Marines there that had served in 3-1, the unit that I was a part of, and they were waiting for us, right? But like you don't even get that. I'm sure. Like you come home and like. And you came home to a lot that was happening. Like,
Yeah.
Your wife had been running the household. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so sort of jump in there.
No,
but,
please.
To your point, anyone who's come home from overseas, anyone who's gone through the Atlanta airport anyways, I'm not sure. I know there's other airports that people come through, but the Atlanta one in particular, I know this was not an uncommon thing, that there were all sorts of military supporters there. They got the American flags, they got the signs, thank you for your service, welcome home, all that kind of stuff. When I came home after my brother was killed, and I was back in the United States like a day and a half later or so, something like that, something like stupid quick. Anyone who's been overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, or anything like that, you don't get home that quickly usually. Yeah. Like it's if you get home in a week, that's pretty fast, right? And so this was they fast tracked everything for me. I was out. I left Afghanistan on the same flight that my brother and another guy who was killed. I was on that same flight. I was there for the ramp ceremony, and I had the seat like right next to his transfer case, and I was watching over it like a freaking hawk. Like I was like big brother still. I still wanted to protect him, but even though he was gone, I wanted to, if anyone even so much as brushed up against us or walking by or something, I would have pounced on him. But thankfully nobody did. But anyways, what I was getting to is when I got to the Atlanta airport, there's all these supporters, and I was like, I just want to ditch my uniform, go buy some civvies, and just blend into the crowd, because I didn't want any of it. I didn't want any of the thank you, welcome home. I don't want any of that kind of crap. I just wanted to blend in and disappear into the crowd. And, so yeah, it definitely wasn't a normal experience.
You have a very unique experience, a very unique story. Number one, like this is your younger brother. I have a younger brother. And no one can ever imagine what it's like, right? No one can. But coming home and understanding that, like, you don't want what everybody calls that hero's welcome, right? Like you came home and you brought your I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but you brought your dead brother home. Like you want everybody away from you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, how do you reconcile that? How do you keep doing the work that you're doing and like not feel? We're diving right into it, right?
Yeah.
So like,
sure.
How do you reconcile the fact that like this happened not just to you, but to you, obviously to your brother, but to your family, and then you come home and you got to figure stuff out and dive into the dad role, which is a whole nother challenge, right? Like the grieving process was probably expedited, and I'm sure it probably like, I don't know if it blew up later on. We'll talk about it, but I mean, maybe you didn't even have chance or that time to grieve.
Honestly, I didn't have really any time to grieve. When I found out that my brother was killed, I was actually out on a mission. We were in some remote village. We flew in the night before on helicopters. We landed on a mountaintop outside the village. We were there with the Afghan army. At first light, we went down into the village, did our thing. And I got a call on the radio from the CO, and he was looking for me, like, specifically. And for anyone who's listening who's not familiar with chain of command, like, that doesn't usually happen. That, like, messages usually filter through the chain of command as opposed to directly unless you did something like really great, like
it's either bad or good.
Really great or really bad. And I was like, I did my job, man. I didn't do anything crazy today. So I was like, man, what did I screw up? Or what did one of my guys screw up or something,
right.
Like something happened. And I was like, man, this is not going to be good because I didn't do anything spectacular. What deployment number is this
for you?
First one.
First one. Okay.
Yeah. I've only deployed once. So I'm all nervous. I'm checking my guys' equipment. I'm trying to figure out what did I screw up.
Right.
And finally linked up with the CO, and he's like, I got some information for you. Come on over here, take a knee. And he tells me, they had me take my helmet off. And I'm like, we're outside the wire. No fuck. Like, why? Why am I taking my helmet off? Like, that's a stupid idea. But I'm like, okay, whatever. And so he's like, yeah, your brother's, he was in an ambush. His unit was ambushed and he got hit. And in my mind, up until that point, I never even considered the option that my brother might not come home, like he might be killed. That's something that happens to other people. That's not going to happen to my brother. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, where is he? Obviously I'm concerned. Like, where is he? Let me get there so I could be there at least, for moral support or whatever. And he's like, he looked at me and he was like I got three eyes or something. And he's like, no, man, like, you don't understand. He was killed. And like in that moment, it was like a punch to the gut. It was absolutely terrible. But about maybe 10 or 15 minutes after 20 minutes or so, time kind of blends together at this point, but a very short amount of time after finding out that he was killed, our unit started taking fire from the village that we had just come out of. So like instantly almost, I had to just shove that grief away because I had a job to do. I had soldiers to lead, and I needed to do my job because first off, I didn't want anything that happened to those guys because my head wasn't on right. Right. Like how do you look at their family later on and be like, I was sad. So, that's why your loved one's not here and I couldn't do my job right. It's like, you can't do that.
Wow.
But I also, in that moment, I was overcome with a tremendous amount of rage, like homicidal rage. I wanted to kill everybody that I saw that was not wearing an American flag on their uniform. I like if they were Afghan, I wanted to kill them because I was like, you guys screwed up your country so much that people like my brother had to come here and die. Screw you guys. And I realized that wasn't going to get me very far. Maybe I'd get a couple guys, but that was going to be about it. I wasn't going to go rid the country of their entire population as the scenario played out in my head. I was like, that's not going to happen. And I got to keep my head cool. So that my parents don't get another knock on the door and, have to bury another son, so, that was where my head was at. And it was really hard for me after getting back home to pick up the grief again and deal with that in a healthy way. I don't know that even still to this day that I really truly processed it all. Certain days like, his birthday or, Christmas or, the anniversary of his passing, like they're just incredibly difficult days for me. And it's hard. But I make it through, because I look at it like, what would he want from me? Would he want me to be sulking and be, upset and angry and all these things, being a miserable person, being a terrible dad, being a terrible husband, all this stuff? Or would he want me to live my best life, and make the most of the opportunity that's been given to me that he didn't have? And so, yeah, I have those moments where it's still hard. But the way I kind of force myself to get through it is like, what would he be saying to me right now if he was here? Get your stuff together and move on. Suck it up, Buttercup. Let's move on.
What was your brother's name?
Steven. Yeah. He was a funny guy. Like he was like one of those practical joker kind of guys. Like he would just screw around with people. There's actually a funny story, and you feel free to cut this out if it's not appropriate for the show.
It is appropriate. We're not cutting anything out. It's appropriate. Right. You're good.
So
feel free.
There's a story that one of the guys he served with was telling us that every once in a while, like there'd be bad days, right? Everyone had bad days, and he would walk up to people that they're mad, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're raging out or whatever, and he'd whip his nutsack out of his pants and just walk around and be like, "Hey, I think I sat in some gum," and make them look at it, and they like instantly, like their mood changed. They're like, "What the fuck? What are you doing?
Yeah,
what are you doing right now?" They just start laughing, right? Well, the reason why it's funny in and of itself. It's a little deranged, maybe, I don't know, but it's funny anyways. But after he was killed, before he was killed, they dismounted out of their vehicles, and as he was getting down, he split his pants, like right in the crotch. And that was one of those days he decided to not wear any underwear, and so he's just walking there with his stuff kind of flopping out.
I get it.
Right? And after he was killed, the way he fell, all his business is just hanging out there. And his buddy, who one of his best friends, came up to him as soon as he was killed, and he looked down and he just started laughing. And everyone thought, like, "Oh my God, he's like lost it." He goes, "No, man, just look, man. He's showing us that it's kind of okay,
Yeah.
That we can laugh about this too, and we can be okay, and we can continue the mission, and we can do what we need to do. But God, I feel sorry for the guys who had to carry him out of there.
Yeah. I want to add something to this, something that it just popped in my mind, but
sure.
I think this is why veterans understand each other, and it's so hard to talk about, because one of the big things that I talk about is that, like, we got to stop separating ourselves from society.
Yeah.
And we got to be a part of it, right? Because we're here now, right? But at the same time, it is so hard to do, because as soon as you told me that story, I felt connection to you. Why? Because I had a team leader, my freaking team leader. What did he do? He would love to whip out his dick, and he would just, like, he would call it the propeller, and he would just, whip it around. And, like, hearing the story just takes me back to my story. It connects us, right? Of, like, everybody has a similar story or something that only we experience, because like you're secluded from society. You're around a bunch of testosterone. There's weapons. Everybody wanted to be this badass. Like you have that warrior mentality, especially the grunts.
Yeah.
Right. So like it's a very, very, very subculture of just a way of being and a way of like coping with stuff. And like my buddy Colin, I can talk about this because I've talked to him about this. 2010, he got blown up and lost both of his sleds. One of them was still hanging on. And when I got up to him, when we all got up to him, one of the first things that he said was, "Hey, check my shit, make sure it's all there." That was his concern. And then the next thing he did was he cracked the joke with one of our other buddies, because they were supposed to move in together and be roommates when they got back. And I think he said something like, "Looks like we're not going to be roommates next year." And like I think society sees that or they interpret it the wrong way.
Right.
There's a couple of scenes in some movies that they turn our dark humor or our attempt to be okay in the situation into this really like dark, nasty joke. I've seen a couple of movies. I won't be specific, but I feel like the translation gets lost because I think we're doing it in the moment just to cope with the thing that's happening. Right. And I think it brings us together, and it's just, I don't know, hearing you tell a story just made me realize that, made me think about it. So I just want to thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right with the dark humor that we have. I think it's, I don't know if it's a coping mechanism or what it is, like why we do that, why we do some things that in, polite society or whatever, that would be seen as like an obscene gesture, but like amongst a bunch of grunts where we can laugh about it,
Yeah.
You're right. It's a different culture. And I think one of the struggles that a lot of veterans have, to your point, when we're reintegrating back into the civilian world, because you're right, we're a part of it. We have to function with the rest of them, is that we kind of miss some of that. Not that I would necessarily miss seeing another guy's, business, but just that mentality and that the way that we would operate together, even just in combat, when I remember one of the first things that we did when we got to Afghanistan, one of the first patrols that we went on, I dismounted with a younger soldier, and the two of us were walking ahead of the trucks, and he looks at me and he goes, "Sergeant, we're clearing the road for IEDs, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, don't get blown up, like that was our job." But I was like, trying to make light of the situation, like, yeah, of course it's going to be potentially serious, right?
Yeah.
There could be nothing there, right? But there could be. So, keep your head on a swivel and keep looking. But I also wanted to kind of calm his nerves a little bit too. And so like, that's the way we did it. And it worked, we all made it out anyway. So, I think it worked.
Do you think it has anything to do with trust? And let me expand on it a little bit, because I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. So I feel like when people get close, brothers, right? Mm-hmm. You grow up together and you go through experiences together and you trust each other, so you can be a little bit vulnerable, which you make the inappropriate jokes. You feel safe, right? Do you think that has anything to do with trust? And like, you don't really experience that when you get out, because it's very hard to replicate that. I mean, you really can't. You can't replicate. You can't replicate it. There's scenarios. I was in law enforcement for 10 years, and there's instances, but you just can't replicate it. You really can't. I'm curious to what your thoughts are on like why we feel so safe to say these things around other people.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there with that. I would imagine law enforcement probably has some similarities, but maybe not to the same extent. But to your point, we trust each other with our lives. I trusted every single guy that I served with to have my back if we're in that kind of situation, and I'm sure they trusted me as well. And other people, yeah, sure, you got to build trust, you got to earn the trust, but once you prove yourself that you're competent, you know what you're doing, you're capable of doing your job, there's no reason that for them not to. I mean, unless you're a complete jerk or whatever, like they may not like you as a person, but they may trust you in those kind of circumstances, right? And so, yeah, to your point, if someone like my brother, he whips his nuts out in the middle of a at his base or whatever, and he's trying to improve morale with that, right? He probably can trust that no one's going to HR and reporting him for some misconduct or anything like that. Versus if he's in his cubicle at work and he whips his junk out, like that's going to be a different story. Like he's probably getting a visit from HR and he's probably getting walked out pretty shortly thereafter, right? So, but you trust the guys that you serve with, and them. You know that they want the best for you. You're not crossing any lines that can't be uncrossed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're not putting them in any dangerous situations. And I think our threshold for that kind of crap is way higher than, your average person's, where somebody else may not put up with something like that. We're kind of just like, actually, it's kind of funny,
And you kind of have to, because if you let them know that it rubs you the wrong way, you don't like it, guess what? They're going to keep doing it. And I learned
100
I learned that the hard way. I had a nickname that I will never, I have no problem repeating it, but I also don't want this episode to get taken down. But at first I was like, why are they, and then I realized it's because I don't like it.
Yeah.
And then it stuck with me forever. And then I was like, hey, that's cool. I put it on my helmet. It was who I was.
Yeah.
And you just got to own it, right? You just got to own it. So I do want to talk about a little bit more about your time coming home, right? Because I mean, you're the way you mentioned it, you went from finding out what happened to your brother to a firefight. Like that's some crazy movie shit. And then you brought him home, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure the process was not only difficult, but like you said, maybe you're still dealing with it. Can you talk to us a little bit about like coming home to that family that was already kind of like rocking and rolling for the most part? Like things were a certain way and you had to learn how to fit into that role. Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, coming back home to that, my wife was incredible in this whole process. She knew that my head wasn't 100% there. So what she did was she just kept doing what she was doing. She was getting up in the middle of the night with the baby to, feed him, change his diaper, all that kind of stuff that parents do. She just continued almost as if I wasn't there to an extent, right? And I'm saying that she wasn't ignoring me or any of that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm trying to say. She was just making sure that she took care of everything that needed to be taken care of, and in the process, showing me how to do all of these things. So when she would go
a little bit of space for you.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was ready to be able to step in, when she was showing me, how to change a diaper, how to heat the bottles for the baby, and all these things that, there's no manual to be a parent, right? Like it's, you walk out of the hospital, first time parent, every one of us, we don't have a clue what we're doing. We kind of wing it and we figure it out. We just, how do I keep this thing alive until he can do it himself,
Yeah.
That's pretty much the name of the game. And, so she was incredible. She didn't force me into anything that she didn't think I was ready for, that I wasn't ready for. She had no problem doing, waking up in the middle of the night, doing all that kind of stuff when, even though I may have still been up because I was sleeping like crap, and she knew I needed to be able to rest. And so she took care of a lot of it. And then, slowly but surely I started to figure things out and figure out where I fit in the whole scheme of things, and eventually kind of got into the swing of things. Eventually we had more kids, and by then I kind of figured out like, hey, this is where I belong, in this family. So, largely my role was kind of your traditional, the way you think, like, maybe 1950s family. I was the one who went to work. My wife stayed home. She had been laid off from her job, and shortly before we had our son, and we were just like, you know what, let's just have you stay with the kids, and I'll work. I'll support the family financially, and you support things on the home front, and I'll step in, where I can. And we're still kind of like that today. My wife homeschools our kids, so she's home and doing all that kind of stuff with them. And I work from home, so I'm here too, and I can step in where needed. On occasion there's things that I'm a little stronger than my wife as far as, teaching the kids, and so I'll step in and I'll help out a little bit, here and there. She does the vast majority of all of it though. And so we kind of just settled into that, and that's how our family has operated for the last 14, 15 years or so at this point. And, it works now, but in the beginning it was just that struggle of figuring it out, and like almost like an identity crisis. Like who am I now? You know, like I haven't been a father before. I mean, I technically was a father before. I just wasn't doing
It's two
dad
major
stuff.
life events, man. Like,
yeah, exactly.
and it's like one was not by choice, obviously, and the other one was, and they still both feel like they're so close together.
Yeah.
Right. So like, how did that affect? I'm sure it affected a lot of stuff, but like, were you up for re-enlistment? Did you decide to get out? What happened?
Yeah. So
following all this,
I was coming up. So my enlistment would have ended about a little over a year after my brother was killed, and I would have been up for re-enlistment at that point. And after coming home, I had some knee injuries. I had surgery, and being an infantry guy on crutches doesn't really bode very well for getting out in the field and doing training and all that kind of stuff.
Bunch of shit talking, I'm sure too.
Yeah, because now I'm the admin guy who's like, doing all the paperwork because nobody else wants to do it, and that's pretty much all I could do. And I'm seeing all my guys going out into the field. They're doing all these things. I couldn't even do a PT test because like I couldn't run. I couldn't do any of that kind of stuff. So, and I'm sitting there just feeling like a worthless piece of crap. And my recovery time from the surgery, I would have been able to get back into doing all that kind of stuff basically at the end of my enlistment. Like it was November of that year. And in November was when the doctor would have cleared me for being able to run and do all that kind of stuff again. And that's when my enlistment would have ended. And so, I was like, I feel like crap. Like the biggest piece of crap because I can't do any of this stuff. And you know how it is. Like, to no fault of my own, like I had an injury. I'm taking care of it. Right. But I still feel like just a piece of crap because I'm not carrying the weight that everybody else has now got to pick up my slack. So I felt terrible about that. I also felt like I just didn't give a damn anymore about the Army. Like my brother's death just sucked the wind right out of me. And we would have, inspections, before going out on a ruck march or, on a, for whatever the training exercise was. And like, there'd be a packing list. The guys are supposed to have, X amount of socks and, change of uniform, boots, all that kind of stuff. And I would honestly, at that point, I was just looking at their stuff and I was like, dude, you're a grown ass man. If you don't have the shit you need, like that's on you. You're going to be cold. You're just going to be sucking. And honestly, I don't care. And that was kind of the moment that I realized like, I don't belong here anymore. So, the Army, I don't know about the other branches. I'm sure the other branches have something similar, but the Army had, at the time, something called Surviving Sons and Daughters. And it was basically for people like me who were in the military, had a family member who was killed in the line of duty and, gave basically a kind of a mechanism for us to get out of the military, before our enlistment was up or whatever. So, I looked into that and I was like, you know what, that is what I need to do. First off, every time I put my uniform back on, I could see it in my family. Like it was just not something that they were comfortable with anymore. Because obviously they're worried now because it was a real possibility that something could happen. And for me, I was like, I'm not the type of leader that my soldiers deserve. And so, like why am I just it was like trying to fit a square peg through a round hole, and it wasn't working. So, so I did that, and I got out a few months before my enlistment was over. It was like, I think June, but before November. So, however many months, I think it was June. I forget now exactly when it was, but, so did almost my entire enlistment, shave a couple months off. But it was just like, I need to be home with my family and I need to figure out what's going on with me, before I can jump back into something where I'm serving other people.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I'm sure it took a toll on your family, like an unbelievable one.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that what I'm trying to say is basically when you got out, did you have a plan in place, or do you feel like you said, you know what, I'm going to figure this out because I know that this is not where I want to be anymore, and your plans just drastically changed because of the fact that like what happened to your brother, and you just knew that like you had to make a big change in your life?
Yeah, I knew that where I was not where I needed to be. I hadn't planned on getting out immediately after my enlistment. I didn't know like how long I would have re-enlisted for. I don't know if I would have, if 20 years was in the plan or whatever. I felt like I probably would have done at least another couple of years. But at that point, I was like, you know what, I don't see this happening. I'm not gonna do anything good while I'm in the military. If anything, I'm gonna get somebody hurt, or something is gonna be bad. And so I was like, I don't need to be here anymore. I'm not serving the purpose that I originally set out to serve. And it was hard for me because I didn't really have a plan other than getting out. Like, I had to figure out, how do I get out? So I did a lot of research trying to figure that out. And once when I was out, it was basically like I got a phone call and it was like, paperwork went through, it's approved, you're done, you're out. Stop by this week to drop off, any equipment that you have, and you're done. And then I was like, oh shit, like that piece of me is gone now. Like I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm a guy. I'm just like anybody else now with, obviously this is in my history, but I'm just like anybody else now. And so what am I? What is a veteran? Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
And that was just like it was a strange experience. And it was something I hadn't really planned for. I didn't think too much about what is it going to be like when that light switch gets flipped and I go from uniform to not uniform. And, that was difficult for me to try to figure out, who am I? And now this is, almost a year after my brother was killed. So all of this is happening all in that same time period.
Yeah.
And so I'm like just a mess, emotionally, my head's not on right. I was drinking too much. I was not doing anything. Basically, it was like the textbook of like, what could you do wrong? And I was reading that as like a to-do list. And it's like, you don't want to do that. That's not, like, don't look at me as an example of what to do. Because it wasn't right. And thank God my wife is the saint that she is, because she stuck with me through all of it. The anger, the drinking, the everything else that I had going on that was just not good. Eventually I got to a point where I was like, I need to get some help because whatever I'm doing is not right. And I need to be a better father to my son. I need to be a better husband to my wife, better just all around person. And I did not like the person that I saw when I looked in the mirror. I started seeing it in my son. He like when I would get angry, I had this face I made where I like clenched my teeth, and it was just like this real ugly looking face. And when my son would get upset because he wasn't, something wasn't going right, and he was just, little at the time, he would make that same angry face. And I saw it, and it was like looking in this little mirror, and I was like, man, what am I doing to this kid?
That happened to me a few weeks ago, man.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but
No, go ahead.
I think that's the reason we're here. I think the fact that like you went down the path that you went on, and you've made some big changes, which we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It resonates with me. That's why I feel the same way. I went down a very similar path. We probably did a lot of the same stuff, probably around the same timeline. And that's what led us to this, right? Trying to make a difference and hopefully let our story be someone else's survival guide and let them learn the lessons without the scars. But yeah, that resonates with me, man. I saw something in my son like a couple weeks ago, and it was me yelling at the dog, and my son did it too. It's like, man, I don't want that. I don't want him to just pick up on the things that I do just because I do them, just because I'm not thinking about it at the moment.
Yep.
So yeah, I have a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. And I see myself in him especially, and I'm working on it. But yeah, there's no manual, you know.
No, there's not. There's not. But you know, to your point, like these kids, you know, anybody's kids, they learn from the other people in their life, just like anybody else, right? Like you go to school and you learn stuff from the teachers who are there, and you learn you know, things from the other kids in your class. You know, like you learn from your environment, and you know, especially as a young kid, you know, someone who's, you know, 3, 4 years old and under, basically all they know is their family. You know, they're not going to school at that young age. Maybe they might have like a, you know, daycare or something like that you might bring them to, but you know, they largely, their family is the people who they're learning from. And when you act a certain way, they're going to learn that, oh, that's the way that you act in this situation. You get it. The dog's doing something wrong. You start yelling at the dog. Okay, well, why are they yelling at the dog? Well, because that's what Dad did. And I had a very similar situation where I was dealing with my anger issues, and our dog at the time, I'm going to give a little backstory here, and it may seem irrelevant, but it'll get relevant in a second here. So our bedroom in our house at the time, before we moved here, it had white carpets in the master bedroom and a tile floor. There's a bathroom like going right off the master bedroom. There's a tile floor in the bathroom. And our dog came into the room, and she was sick. And so she threw up on the carpet, but right at like the edge of like 6 inches this way, you're on the tile.
Yeah.
And she chose to throw up on the carpet. And I just flipped out and I started yelling at the dog, and I pushed the dog into the bathroom, and I'm like, and as soon as I did that, I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, yeah, sure. Maybe, worst case scenario, the carpet's a little stained, you know, not the end of the world, right? What am I doing? Like, this dog, doesn't matter like what happens, this dog is super happy when she sees me walking through the door every single time without fail, comes running to me like, where have you been all my life? You know, that kind of thing. And I'm this asshole who just like pushed her into the bathroom to like make a point or something. It's like, the dog's sick. That's not helping anything. Yelling at the dog, you know, push all this stuff. None of that's going to help the dog. None of it's going to help the situation. Yeah. And that was actually the moment that I realized I needed to get help, because I was like, first off, I love dogs. I mean, I like dogs more than I like most people. So I'm like one of those kind of, you know, and I'm like, if I'm treating a dog this way, like, I am not treating people okay. And I was like, I hate thinking about myself like this. Like, I hate who I've become. I didn't like anything about it. And so that's that. In that moment, I was like, you know what, tomorrow morning it was kind of like, you know, around bedtime or whatever. I said, tomorrow morning I'm making a call, and I'm making an appointment, you know, with the VA to try to get some help, because I need something. I didn't know where else to turn at that point. Yeah. And so I went there and, you know, tried to get, you know, as much help as I could. And they were helpful dealing with anger issues. You know, of course, like everybody else, I have some issues from time to time where I yell and I get a little angry and, you know, kind of lose my temper, but it's nowhere near the way it was before. It was like a daily occurrence, multiple times a day, where the littlest things, the just so minor inconvenience, like, you know, you spill something, or, you know, you make a little mess, and I would flip out and I would yell, and I'd just be a total jerk about everything, you know?
Yeah.
And so they help with that a lot, where I've been able to keep my anger under control, you know, at least. And so I felt like I owed that to my family. If nobody else, like my family doesn't deserve to grow up, and my kids don't deserve to grow up in a house where dad's screaming all the time and yelling about every little thing. My wife doesn't deserve to be married to someone who's always yelling about every little thing. Like what kind of environment is that to grow up in, or just to live in general? Never mind growing up, as a little kid where you have no control, no power over anything. What kind of environment is that? And what am I doing to these kids? To these people, my wife, anybody really who I interacted with, I was just angry with everybody. So it helped me kind of put some stuff in perspective, helped me move past the anger part of things anyways. Maybe not so much on, some other stuff that, even to this day, just full disclosure, I still deal with this. I got, still in therapy, working with the VA and, other, things like that, just trying to get better, incrementally. It's a lot to unpack, a lot to deal with, and it's not an immediate process. I've made this analogy before too, where like you're sick, you go to the doctor, you get some medicine, or, you break a bone, you get cast on it, it heals, you're done, it's over. It's behind you now, right? Yeah. This is something that's kind of like more ongoing, where it doesn't just go away. Even PTSD, even the grief from losing my brother, all of those things, they don't just go away. Even if I might have a good day, like today might be a great day. It's maybe it's sunny outside, I'm happy, I had something to look forward to. But tomorrow something might just trigger something with me, and I'm having a shitty day again, and you never know. So it's an ongoing process, and it's really just learning how to cope with it and deal with it. And for me anyways, it's just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that dealing with it is important because, at least for me, I deal with this shit too. I realized early on in my law enforcement career that I was using all the anger that I had as a tool to not take it out on people, but I was definitely using it as like a tool to fire me up, to get the most arrests, to get onto the search warrant team, to show up early and leave late, to get onto undercover spots that I wanted. And then I realized that I was using it as a tool, but the thing that I was sacrificing was my marriage. I have 2 failed marriages. I was overweight. I was drinking all the time. My off time I would spend it drinking. This is all before I had kids. Mm-hmm. And then I got help too. I think that getting help, especially if you have the resources there, and I'm thankful that you shared the fact that like you had a good experience with the VA. I think that not enough people talk about the good stuff. Everybody loves to talk about the negative stuff.
Right.
So I think that there's definitely power in sharing that. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had but the first place I went through was through the vet center, which they're like affiliated with the VA, I guess. I'm not sure the exact hierarchy, exactly how all that works, but it's government stuff. Anyways, who knows? But I've had good and bad experiences. Sure. I've had some really great people that I've talked with that really helpful, really like they seem to care. And I've had some other experiences where it was almost felt like I was just a number on a list, and it was like, well, pushing this one through, and it just didn't feel like I was getting what I needed. So good and bad. I'm definitely not going to knock them. There's some great people who work for the VA. But I think it's just like anywhere. You're going to have some great people, and you're going to have some not so great people. And it really depends on who you get, who you're talking to. And so for the listeners here who might be in that situation where they're like, you know what, I'm writing the VA off because I had a bad experience. Well, okay, fine. You had a bad experience. Maybe you had a few bad experiences, but it doesn't mean that everybody that you're going to deal with is going to be bad. Right. And so, you can ask for a different provider. if the provider that
Yeah.
you've been assigned is not working for you, and it doesn't seem like you're getting the treatment that you need or the help that you need or whatever it is that whether it's mental health or physical health, it doesn't matter. If you don't feel like you're being taken care of, this goes for anybody. Like, it doesn't matter if VA or not. Like, wherever you go, if the provider's not cutting it for you, like, go find someone else. Like, there's plenty of people out there.
That's actually where I'm at right now. So
Yeah.
I just quit my job, law enforcement, doing it for 10 years, and I was using, their insurance, and now I'm using the VA. So I'm learning how to navigate it. I've used it before for stuff. Don't get me wrong. But it's always been like, well, I have my insurance, so I'm going to do everything through this insurance. And now I'm learning that, there's nothing wrong with going through that system. It's just
Right.
a little bit different. And that's all it is. Every person is a different person.
Yep.
People. And I also think that part of the reason why the VA gets a bad rap is just because, think about it. It's a system that gets a bad rap sometimes, more often than not, I feel like. And therefore people go there, and I'm gonna say it straight up. A lot of veterans can be assholes.
Yeah.
So, and that's not everybody. That's not like 100%. No, but a lot of veterans can be assholes. So if you deal with assholes all the time, you're gonna get a little bit jaded on both ends, being
Right.
there and growing there. So I think that the relationship can get better on both ends if we just understand that people are people. And like you said, if you have a provider that you don't like, or you want to ask for somebody else, like it's within your rights.
Yeah.
So
And-
that's
and
something that I'm learning too.
I will say this, as far as like, the people who call to like confirm appointments or
Oh my God.
reschedule things like that, like the nicest people I've ever talked
Yes.
to. I've had some incredible people. They laugh, they joke, they're funny, they're personable. They'll just they can actually brighten your day sometimes. It's like you get that phone call and you might be in a little rough mood, and they can diffuse it pretty quickly because they're actually polite. And I've talked to other
I've
people,
noticed that
like
too.
other people, for other other places that I might go through, and they're just like, yeah, what do you want? That kind of thing. It's like, dude, I don't want to talk to you.
And there's no way you're missing an appointment. They message you, they call you, they text you, they send you a letter, carrier pigeon, everything.
I was gonna say, like smoke signals, they got everything.
Yeah,
like
everything,
if you need it, they'll do it. And even if you don't need it, you're getting it anyways. And you get reminded. Like, I think I counted for one appointment, I had like 8 reminders. One
Seems
of them,
reasonable.
I got 2 text messages as I was driving to the appointment, and the place is like 10 minutes from my house. So within 10 minutes, I got 2 text messages reminding me to show up on time. I was on time.
Yeah.
We're good.
All right, let's stop for a minute. This is the part of the episode where I ask you to do me a favor. But it's not a favor for me. It's a favor for your fellow brothers and sisters that served with you. If you know someone that has been struggling, if you know someone that has been going through it right now, and you know that they want better for their life, they just don't know how to do it, please share this episode with them. It might just be exactly what they need. That's it. That's my only ask. If you want to subscribe, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Back to the episode.
So we've talked a little bit about when you were in, obviously what happened with your brother and when you got out. Can we talk a little bit more about what happened between you deciding to get help and kind of where we're at now and that timeline and kind of what it looks like? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are taking away a lot of the fact that like you have this very traumatic event, and I'm sure a lot of people have a different type of traumatic event, and then like you making the decision to get help. And I think that's the most important part of like, what does that journey look like? And what did it look like for you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing was I needed to make that decision to get help. The decision wasn't being made for me. I had to do that on my own. For a lot of the folks who have been deployed, when you come back home, they have the mental health screenings, they have all the the physicals, all that kind of stuff. They want to make sure you're good to go when you come back. And I screwed up. I lied through my teeth through all of those assessments because I said, I just want to get home to my family. that's where I want to be right now. I want to be with them. I don't want to deal with any of this crap. I don't want to have to go to any mandatory appointments, and I don't want to do any of this kind of stuff anymore. I just want to be with my family. That's it.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, how much are you drinking? Oh, geez, no, God, barely touch the stuff. How much are you sleeping? Oh, 8 hours a night, easy. I was lying through my teeth through the whole, mental health screenings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And they checked the box saying I'm good to go and moved on. But that was on me. I don't blame them for not catching this, because how would they know? They're not. I don't want them standing in my bedroom, timing how long I'm sleeping or measuring the amount of alcohol that I drink every day, or I don't want them doing all that stuff. And so, and I don't think anyone does. And so, because I screwed up and I lied to them, they got that information, and so they made the best decision that they could with the information they had. But like the saying goes, you have garbage in, you have garbage out. And so, the assessment wasn't worth the paper it was written on, because I completely lied my way through it. And so eventually I had to make that decision to get the help. And like I said, I had that kind of rock bottom moment, if you will. And, I said, I don't like this person that I've become. I thought back to who I was before I was deployed, before my brother was killed. I was a pretty happy guy. Nothing really bothered me. Everything just kind of rolled off my back. And, I like to go out and do things with friends. And, I was becoming more shut in, and I didn't care to see anyone and talk to anyone and do anything. And I just, I would go to work because like that was my end of the bargain with my wife, was like, I kind of have to provide financially, so that we can continue.
What were you doing for work?
I worked at an insurance company. At the time I had an accounting degree, so I was in finance, at this insurance company, a financial analyst, which after coming back from combat zone was the most tedious, awful job that I couldn't take it. After coming back home, this is something else I forgot about, but forgot to mention, after coming back home, my boss, he was an Air Force veteran. He was like, look, you came home early. This was August. I wasn't expected to be back until like late October, early November, sometime around that time period. And he goes, I'm not expecting you back until November. And so take your time with, coming back. Because he knew I was probably dealing with a lot of stuff, and I probably needed time. And I really appreciated that. When I came back, I couldn't do it anymore. Like I almost immediately, I just hated being in that office environment. I hated. So
this was a job you had before.
Yeah.
Before you left and then came back to it.
Yeah, because I was National Guard, so I had a regular civilian job, and then I came back, and they were awesome. They my job, the company was going through a bunch of layoffs. My job was safe, which I think they were probably more worried about the lawsuits if they fired a combat veteran while he was deployed. That would be pretty awful. So so my job was safe. But they were amazing. They sent care packages. They invited my wife and my son into the office just for like little like parties and things like that, just that they would have, and it was just like a very welcoming, friendly environment. Incredible people. But I couldn't do it anymore when I came back home.
Everything's changed.
Everything changed for me, and the pace of work was just like, people would make a big deal over like little things, like, and I'm like, none of this stuff matters. Like who cares if this number is off by in finance, if it's off by especially in an insurance company, we're talking about millions, even billions of dollars. Sometimes like we're talking huge numbers. Who cares if it's off by $1,000? Who cares? And I was just like, the things that people care about were not the things I cared about. And I was just struggling to find my way to fit back in to that environment. And I got to the point where I realized I don't think I do fit in this environment anymore. And so I sought out entrepreneurship. Let's just put it that way, where I could kind of be my own boss, set my own hours. When I'm having a real bad day, okay, fine, take some time and straighten things out. And I was able to take time off to go to therapy and go work on me. And the way I see building a business is kind of similar to some of the work I needed to do to help myself out. Is you're starting off with just about nothing. When you hit rock bottom, your foundation is like there's nothing really there. And you start a business, you really don't have too much, and you gotta start building that incrementally, and gradually you grow it to something bigger and better. And so I've had several businesses over the course of the years, and to me it was liberating to be able to do that, to not have to report to anybody. I didn't have any deadlines or any things that I felt like were artificial deadlines, where people were like rushing to get stuff done by the end of the day because it's like, well,
it's busy work.
It was busy work, and it's like that problem will be here tomorrow too. Like, just it's not that big a deal. And so I try to incorporate that into my businesses that I've had over the years, where it's like, yeah, it seems like it's a big deal right now. It'll still be a big deal tomorrow, and it's not the end of the world. So take it, one step at a time. And so that had been helpful for me to be, kind of independent that way, and not chained down to somebody else's schedule or somebody else what somebody else dictates that I need to do.
Right.
I felt like I got away from that in the military, like where you're told what you got to wear, what you got to do, when you have to be there, all that kind of stuff. Like I got away from that. I kind of felt like I'm done with that. I've even thought to myself, like, I don't know if I'm actually employable, anymore. Like I don't know that I can handle.
Not anymore.
I mean, you've
once you get a taste of liberation,
you've tasted the freedom bug, right?
Oof,
like, it's gonna be that would be a tough sell if you're like, what, maybe I'm gonna go back to the police force. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Everybody's different, and not everyone wants to do that or is even capable of doing it. Maybe that you don't have an idea for a business. Well, that's gonna be kind of hard to start a business, but
it's a trade-off. Like you have different types of pressures. But it just depends what you want to do.
Right. Yeah. And so if I want to make $1 million, I'm gonna have to work really hard to make $1 million. And okay, so I work really hard and I do that, but I'm gonna trade off a lot of time that I spend with my kids. So maybe I don't want to make $1 million. Right. Do I want to make $500,000? Do I want to make 100,000? Do I want to make 50,000? What is it that I'm comfortable with?
Right. Exactly.
And what's that trade-off? How much time do I want to be able to spend with my kids? I mean, they're not getting any younger. We got teenagers in the house now, so pretty soon they're gonna be moving out, and it's gonna be like, where did their childhood go? And so like I want to be around for that stuff, and be able to take them to their baseball games and do things that dads do with their kids. And so that's allowed me to do that, and with a trade-off. Not every year was a stellar year that I'm gonna put in the history books that I made a ton of money, and I got to spend a ton of time with my kids, and it's all been awesome, but you do the best you can with what you have to work with, and that's kind of where it's brought me here. And over the last few years, I started my podcast, the Drive On podcast, because I realized that I wasn't the only one hurting, the only one struggling. Guys that I served with, they made it through Afghanistan, and the way I think of it is that's a place where many people wanted to kill us. They wanted us dead, and they had plenty of opportunities to do it. But we survived, and we came back home. But then we started losing guys when we came home, and that just didn't sit right with me. Like, Like, how do you go from a place where people want you dead to a place where people want you to not only like survive but thrive? They want the best for you, and now we lose people. Like that just, I couldn't wrap my head around that, and so that's why I started the show, is because I like just too many people. Not just the guys that I served with, but I started realizing and being aware of the more broader veteran community, and I was like, this is not okay. I can't just sit around waiting for a phone call saying, somebody else that I know has been killed. But there's how many other people, dozens of other people every day are gone that I don't know, because they're not realizing that there's help out there. And I'm not even talking about the VA. A lot of people might be hearing this like, oh, the VA, they suck and I don't want to deal with them. Fine, don't. They may not be for you. Okay, cool. There's way more people than you think out there there's thousands of nonprofits out there that exist just for veteran purposes. It could be financial aid. It could be mental health. It could be, alternative kind of therapies, all sorts of different things that are out there. And they exist to make the lives of veterans better. And that's what I wanted to do, is share stories of other veterans who've been through hell and came out the other side, a better person, and give some hope to the listeners to make sure that they know that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. As dark as it may seem in that tunnel, even if you may not realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, there is one if you keep going. And so sharing those kind of stories, but also sharing the resources that maybe you just don't know it's available. If sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And, what am I going to go and do a Google search for if I don't know what it is that I'm even looking for,
Right.
So I try to share those resources that are unique. Maybe they're young, maybe they don't have a lot of funding for advertising. They're not a Wounded Warrior Project kind of organization that's just a behemoth and they're everywhere. So I try to share all of those other organizations that do so many great things. And each one's going to be a little bit different. Some of them have specific groups of people that they work with, like maybe just Gold Star families, people who've lost a loved one in service. Okay, well, there's groups that work with them. There's groups that just work with combat controllers, or they just work with Navy SEALs, or they just work with Marines, or whatever it is. There's organizations out there, but whatever bubble you fit into, there's a group out there that wants to help you.
Oh yeah.
And so I just try to shed light on all of those, and that to me has given me a sense of purpose and meaning in that question that, after I got out, when I was like, what the hell am I now? What is a veteran? Right. And I'm not saying every veteran has to do something like this and they got to go out and be an advocate and do all this kind of stuff. Yeah, everyone finds what it is that's right for them. But for me, I've just found a sense of purpose and meaning in doing this type of thing. More so than I did anything else. A heck of a lot more than, crunching numbers at an insurance company. Like that type of thing. And so I work on this for those other people who are struggling. And selfishly, it's a bit of therapy for me too, because I get to talk to other veterans like yourself and kind of hear their stories and hear where they went through. And sometimes it's a kick in the ass because, sometimes the people, like there's a guy I was talking to earlier today, he lost both of his legs in an explosion. And I'm like, well, man, he's out there killing it. And I still got 2 functional legs, Maybe I'm not in as good a shape as I was when I was in my 20s, but I got no excuse why I can't get up and do the things that he does, Yeah. So, I listen to these kind of stories and it kind of gives me a little bit of motivation to move on too, so it's a little bit of selfish therapy for me as well.
Yeah. It's a process, right? It's a process and you got to take something away from everything, and it sounds like you've gone through the ringer in a lot of different situations, and you've had the traumatic experiences, and thankfully, like, you're still here with us fighting and like sharing the message of everyone that you feel has a story to share. And I love that, honestly. I would love to know kind of what's going on with you right now and what you're looking forward to, just to give an idea of, like, where you're at now and what's been going on with you, and just to share everything that you want to share with everyone that's listening to learn a little bit more about where you're at right now and what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So one big thing that's kind of new in my world over the last couple weeks here is so when we were at the Military Influencer Conference, I met up with some of the folks who run the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, and they were just such incredible people, and I was so inspired by what it was that they were creating, and I got to talking to them, got to learn a little bit about them, and vice versa. They got to learn a bit about me, and they approached me a few weeks ago and asked me if I would be willing to be a veteran fellow for the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. And basically my role is, along with the other fellows, there's some Gold Star fellows. I'm considered like a uniformed veteran because I was in the military, but there's non-uniformed veterans that they have as a fellow as well, who served in other capacities, non-uniformed capacities. And the goal of what I'm doing is to help raise awareness of this memorial. It's just such an incredible thing. A few years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I took a run around the mall area, where the Vietnam Memorial is, and all the other war memorials. Kind of took a jog around there, and I was stopping at each of them. And at the end of the jog, I was like, where the hell is ours? For the Global War on Terrorism, Iraq, Afghanistan, all the other places that are included in the Global War on Terrorism. And I was like, where is this memorial? And I kind of felt like we were kind of just like a tossed aside almost. Like all the other generations had them, and so it kind of got under my skin. But then when I met these guys at the conference, I was like, thankfully somebody's doing something about this.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know even where to start. Like, even if I was to do something like that, but they figured it out and they got it started. And I was just like so in awe that they actually did it. And I was so thankful that they're putting this thing together.
It's
and
amazing.
And then when they approached me to be a fellow with the organization, I was like beyond honored. First off, like it's such an awesome organization.
It's really cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's something that's really got me going. I'm still, like I said, this has only been a couple of weeks now since this started, and so I'm still trying to figure out where I fit into the whole experience here. But it's just a to me, it's just an awesome organization, and I'm glad that veterans of the Global War on Terrorism will be able to see that their service, their sacrifices are being recognized sooner than later. We the World War II memorial, I think, didn't get put up until I think it was 50 or 60 years after World War II ended. And by that time, a lot of the guys weren't with us anymore, and they never get to see it. My grandfather was one of them. He served in World War II, and he died well before the memorial went up. And I'm just glad that this is happening sooner than later, so that the guys that like you and me, and the guys that we served with, and gals, all of us who served in the Global War on Terrorism in any capacity. That's the thing I love about this. They're not limiting this just to military service member, veteran, whatever you want to call it. This is a memorial for all inclusive. includes Gold Star families, people who've lost, a loved one. It includes people who served in other roles in like the CIA or FBI or, other, organizations like that. It's all inclusive of everybody who served. And that to me is just an amazing thing because, I hate to see any of these people feel like, oh, my contribution wasn't worth it, or it wasn't appreciated or anything like that. So seeing that this is kind of the steps that they're going through to get this out there, I'm just so happy that it's coming together like this. So
no, that sounds amazing, and I'm happy that they have you there to be able to provide input. And I think this is going to be something huge for a lot of us, just because I tell you right now, like the way that we left Afghanistan, it's a huge moral injury for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I was not a part of Iraq, right? But I mean, I'm sure there's a different type of moral injury there.
For sure.
So I hear you on that. And I'm happy that they're doing something. I'm happy that we'll be able to see something that represents us, and as well as those that didn't come home, and those that did come home and still had to fight a different, battle here at home.
100%. Yeah. So that's something that's going to be coming up in the next few years here.
Awesome.
And they're in the design and all that kind of phase right now, trying to figure out what it's going to look like and all that. I think they have the location kind of scoped out. It'll be, if you're familiar with that area, it's between the Vietnam Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial, in that general vicinity. So they have that scoped out so far. And then working on design stuff, and that I think is going to be, incredible design. Once we see what that looks like, but I'm positive that they're going to do a great job with that, because it's just such a great team of people that they have on board, and everything that they're doing is incredible work. So,
well, I'm really happy to hear that, and thank you for sharing that with us. And hey, man, they couldn't have chosen anyone better for that, because I think they need input from as many different places as possible, right? Because I mean, everybody has their own way. A lot of people have their own way of how they see what the past was. It been 20 years now? It's more than 20 years now.
Yeah, over 20 years. So 24-ish years, give or take. 20, 23, 24.
Yeah. Yeah, brother. Well, listen, man, I don't want to end, but I also want to make sure that we have the story right. So I would love to ask you, just on a closing note, if there's one piece of advice that you would give to someone who went through something similar to what you went through, possibly a traumatic event, or maybe right now they're in that place where they feel like they can't get the help, or they don't want the help because they feel like they have to do it on their own. Like, what would just be a one piece of advice that you would give to them?
Yeah, definitely don't do it alone. What I tried to do when I was trying to figure these things out on my own, I thought I was tougher than I was. I was like, you know what? And it's not even about toughness. Honestly, I don't want to put it that way, because I don't want people to think, well, I'm tougher than that guy, so I'll be able to figure it out, right? I think it was just my ego, or being arrogant. I was letting that get in the way of getting better. Where it's like, no, I can do this on my own. I don't need other people to help me. But if you think about it, like, think about all the things that you do in your day-to-day life that you do need people to help you, right? I don't, my car is making a funny noise. I don't know how to fix it, so I bring it to a mechanic, right? Nobody looks at me like, oh my God, what a wacko for bringing your car to a mechanic. Like, why couldn't you just do that yourself? You go to get your hair cut, right? Because you don't want your hair looking like a freaking clown. You go, to a restaurant to get a great meal because maybe you don't know how to cook or something. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
no, I get it.
You rely on other people for certain things, right? And even if you do know how to cook, sometimes you just don't want to. And it's a nice to have thing, and somebody else is there to take that weight off your shoulders, right? And you're able to do that. And so, like, why wouldn't you take, something that's so important as your mental health? Why wouldn't you take that and let somebody else help guide you through it? And so I guess my biggest piece of advice for people is don't do it alone. Don't, because you're going to just end up suffering longer than you need to. And, no one needs to suffer, but sometimes you do need to suffer to have that breakthrough, to get through to that other side. But let someone help you get through there. So that way it's not prolonged. Prolonged suffering isn't going to help anything.
Yeah. There's no such thing as a one-man fire team. That's the way that I always like to think about it too.
Yeah. And if you are in a one-man fire team, you've probably got to start, hightailing it out of there, because it's not going to work out very well for you.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Scott, listen, man, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners are going to love everything that we talked about, and I'd love to have you on again for sure. Where can people find you? Where can they listen to the podcast? Where can they get more of you? Anything at all you want to share? Yeah,
absolutely. So the podcast, again, Drive On Podcast. Any socials, it's all Drive On Podcast. And if you go to, anywhere that you listen to podcasts, wherever you listen to this, you can just search for Drive On Podcast. You'll find it there. YouTube, X, I put all the full videos on there. Social media, I usually put, short clips of the episodes, just little snippets of highlights and things like that. But, X and YouTube, I put the full video, on there as well. So that's where you can find it. And driveonpodcast.com as well is the website where you can.
Yeah, this guy's a professional. He has a website and everything. I love it. We have to build one out for us now. Scott, it was a pleasure, man. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Setting the freaking bar, my man. I love it. I saw your stuff. I'm like, damn, this guy gets it. And I loved it. It was great to be on your show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, Scott, thank you again so much for taking time to be with us today. I really appreciate it. And it was a great story. And I feel like we didn't have a chance to talk about everything, but I'm sure we'll have you back on. And, I'd love to be on your show again if you ever want to have me on. I don't know if I was boring or not, but.
Oh, no, you're good. You were absolutely good. And we'll definitely have to do it again.
Sounds good.
And both ways. I'd love to be back on as well on here.
For sure,
so
bro.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Vet Rise podcast. If today's episode inspired you, made you think, or simply gave you hope, I have a small favor to ask. Share it with just one veteran or someone you think could benefit from my message. Your share could light a spark for them. You don't know who you might save. For more insights and to join our mission, follow my socials at JP the Veteran Coach and explore how we can rise together. Thank you for joining us, for being part of this journey, and for believing in the power of rising together. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep rising, and never forget that we are stronger together. My name is Juan Perez, and thank you for your time.